I'm going to tell you about something that happened to me a few years ago, something that has never left my mind. When I was 16, I was just a regular kid from a small town. I liked sports, hanging out with my friends, and I had an insatiable curiosity for the unknown. Maybe it was that curiosity, mixed with the desire to impress, that led me to accept the challenge of going into the cemetery. At the time, I thought I was invincible, like many teenagers. Nothing really seemed capable of scaring me. It was a Friday night, and like usual, my friends and I didn't have much to do. We were bored, walking around town, when someone suggested a test of courage. The idea was simple: go into the old cemetery and grab some kind of souvenir as proof we'd been there. The cemetery was known for its dark stories, but everyone treated them as urban legends. We laughed about those stories, trying to hide the nervousness behind our jokes. It was all just fun. Until it wasn't. We entered the cemetery, and the atmosphere changed immediately. The air felt colder, and the silence was oppressive. We walked between the tombstones with our flashlights, pretending to be calm, but there was a palpable tension in the group. That's when I saw something shining in the distance. Near an old grave, covered in moss and almost forgotten by time, there was a finely detailed silver rose, partially hidden among the leaves. The moonlight made it shine in an almost surreal way. My friends stopped talking, all of them looking at me, waiting for me to be the brave one who would grab it. Without thinking much, I picked it up and put it in my pocket, feeling a strange satisfaction. But deep down, something felt wrong. That same night, I went home with the rose in my pocket, feeling victorious. I slept peacefully, not thinking much about what I had done. But what happened afterward haunts me to this day. In the middle of the night, I woke up in a familiar place, but it was distorted. I was in the cemetery, but the shadows were thicker, the silence more oppressive, as if the world around me was suffocating. Suddenly, a female figure emerged from the darkness between the tombstones. She was dressed in black, with a pale, lifeless face, her empty eyes fixed on me. Her cold, distant voice echoed in my mind. "You took something that doesn't belong to you." I woke up, startled, my heart racing. I tried to convince myself it was just a nightmare, but the feeling of fear lingered. In the following days, everything seemed normal. Life went on, and the silver rose became just another object in my room. I tried to forget the nightmare, but every time I saw the rose, something inside me stirred. Then, a week later, the nightmare returned, but this time it was much more vivid. I was back in my room, but something was wrong. The air was thick, and a chilling cold filled the space. The moonlight filtered through the curtains, casting strange shadows on the walls. In the corner of the room, where the darkness was deepest, there she was, the woman from the cemetery, motionless, watching me. Her empty eyes gleamed with a silent malevolence, and her voice, now more threatening, whispered, "Since you didn't return what's mine, I'll take something that's yours." I woke up in a state of pure panic, my body drenched in cold sweat. I tried to calm down, but something had changed. In the days that followed, I started to feel sick. First came a persistent fever, then an exhaustion that seemed to drain all my energy. I couldn't sleep anymore because I was terrified of meeting that woman again in my dreams. My friends noticed the change, but I avoided talking about what was happening. I began to isolate myself, afraid that something even worse might happen. Each day, I felt weaker, as if something was sucking the life out of me. Finally, unable to endure the torment any longer, I made a decision. I needed to return the silver rose to the grave where I found it. I waited until the middle of the night, when the town was completely silent, and walked to the cemetery alone. Fear accompanied me with every step, but I knew I had no choice. When I arrived at the cemetery, the feeling of being watched was overwhelming. The shadows seemed to move, as if the cemetery itself was alive, waiting for me. With trembling hands, I placed the rose back on the grave and murmured an apology, feeling an immense weight lift off my shoulders. But before leaving, something made me look back. When I turned around, I saw the silver rose shining brightly under the moonlight, just like the first time I found it. But this time, the glow was more intense, almost hypnotic, as if it were alive. That glow was etched into my mind, and I knew that, even if I wanted to, I would never be able to forget it. Since that night, I never dreamed of the woman from the cemetery again. The fever disappeared, and slowly, my energy returned. Life moved on, but that cemetery, that rose, and that glow under the moonlight stay with me, like a shadow, always lurking in my memory.
Many years have passed, but certain memories never fade. I was 15 when something terrible happened, something that shaped my life in a way I could never have predicted. At that age, my worries should have been about school, friends, or future plans, but instead, I was trapped in a nightmare that haunts me to this day. My mother had died suddenly in an accident that no one expected. At the time, my father simply shut down, unable to cope with the loss. He spent his days sitting on the porch, staring at the horizon, as if waiting for something that would never come. Meanwhile, the responsibility of caring for my 9-year-old brother, Liam, and my baby sister, Emma, fell on me. The strange thing started subtly. I remember being in the living room, trying to entertain Emma while Liam played in the yard. Emma was fussy, whining on her playmat. I sat down next to her, trying to distract her with anything I could. Then, suddenly, the light in the room flickered and went out. It wasn't a power outage, just that specific light bulb went out. And when I looked at Emma, she was completely still, staring at the dark hallway. I turned to see what had frightened her, but there was nothing there. At first, I tried to ignore the incident, thinking it was just a faulty bulb, but over time, things got worse. The nights became especially disturbing. Liam began having frequent nightmares, waking up in panic and calling for me to comfort him. Sometimes, while I was sitting by his bed, I heard soft, indistinct whispers coming from the hallway. They seemed distant, yet close, as if someone was whispering right next to me. Those whispers sounded like my mother's voice, but there was something different about them, something unsettling. One night, after calming Liam down, I went to check on Emma in her room. The house was silent, the only sound coming from the wind blowing outside. When I entered the room, a cold sensation enveloped me. Emma was sleeping, but beside her bed, there was a shadow. It had a human shape, but something about it was wrong. It was too tall, too thin, as if the figure had been stretched. I froze, my heart racing. The shadow didn't move, but I could feel it watching me, a cold and oppressive presence. Suddenly, it leaned towards Emma as if it wanted to touch her. My body was paralyzed with fear. I couldn't scream, I couldn't move. Finally, as if it had heard my plea, the shadow disappeared into the darkness, and the room returned to normal. I told my father, but he just shook his head, lost in his grief, saying it was all in my imagination. But I knew it wasn't. I knew something was very wrong. The worst happened on a stormy night. I woke up to Emma crying desperately. I ran to her room, and there it was again, the shadow, leaning over her bed. This time, the shadow turned to face me, revealing a familiar yet horrifying face. It looked like my mother, but her eyes were empty, lifeless. She didn't speak, but the anger and desperation emanating from her were almost palpable. I knew she wanted Emma, and not for a good reason. I tried to move forward, but the shadow blocked my way, and the entire room seemed to freeze. Tears streamed down my face as I begged her to stop, to leave my sister alone. Finally, as if it had heard my plea, the shadow vanished into the darkness. I checked on my sister, and luckily she was fine, but I felt that something inside me had been taken that night. After that, the house became eerily quiet, the whispers stopped, and the shadow never appeared again.
I never imagined that something as simple as leaving a forum could be a matter of life and death. But it was. It all started during the height of the pandemic in 2020. Like everyone else stuck at home, I sought some form of connection and ended up getting involved in a dark corner of the internet, a creepy forum. The forum was a place where people shared conspiracy theories, horror stories, and a mix of bizarre topics. At first it was fun, almost addictive, spending hours reading and participating in discussions. It was a refuge, a way to escape the loneliness that isolation brought. With the world outside at a standstill, the internet was all I had to maintain some human contact, to fend off the emptiness that filled the endless days. The first sign that something was wrong came as a direct message I received on the forum. "I liked your theory about the disappearance of the kids on Maple Street, but you should really check the broken window in your attic." My blood ran cold. The broken attic window was something only I knew about. I had never mentioned it online, never posted a picture, nothing. My initial reaction was to think it was just a troll trying to scare me. I brushed it off, but the unease lingered. As the days passed, the messages became more specific. "Your cat looks cozy on that red couch. Hope she doesn't knock over your glass of wine." It was as if someone was watching me in real time. I stopped drinking wine and moved the couch to another room, but it didn't matter. The messages kept coming, revealing intimate details about my life that no one outside my home should know. Then, one night, I received an email from an unknown address. "It's no use staying away from the forum. I see everything." My heart raced. I tried to rationalize it, tell myself it was just a sick joke, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. Someone or something was watching me. I wasn't safe, not even in my own home. Desperate, I reached out to my best friend, Marcus, via video call. We'd been inseparable since elementary school, and if anyone could help, it was him. When I told him what was happening, he took it seriously. He's always been the rational one, and he suggested I delete my forum account and stay off the internet for a way, while to cut off whatever connection the stalker had. It was a hard decision since the internet was my only company during that dark period. But Marcus was right. I had to do it. For my sanity, for my safety. I deleted my account, closed the browser, and for a moment there was silence. But then, the real horror began. That night, my phone buzzed with a text message. It wasn't from the forum. It wasn't even from a number I recognized. It simply read, "Deleting your account won't stop me." I dropped the phone as if it were on fire. I couldn't breathe. The room felt like it was closing in on me, the shadows creeping closer, suffocating me with their darkness. My devices started going haywire. The lights flickered, my laptop refused to turn on, and my TV displayed static, interrupted by brief flashes of distorted images of me, in my own home, as if filmed from within. My reflection appeared on the screen, distorted, ghostly, and then it was gone, replaced by a message, "You can't hide," without being able to receive in-person help. Marcus and I spent the night messaging back and forth, trying to solve the situation remotely. He guided me to turn off everything, disconnect the Wi-Fi, and isolate the devices that could be used to spy on me. Even so, the feeling of being watched persisted. I felt surrounded, as if there were eyes in the shadows, in every corner. The next day, fear took over me. I finally decided to call the police. When they arrived and investigated the situation, they discovered that it was a disturbed neighbor who had been stalking me for months. He had managed to access my personal information and was watching me closely, using the details he collected to manipulate and frighten me. The man was taken away by the police, and since then, the disturbances have stopped. But knowing that someone so close could invade my life in this way is a terror that will stay with me for a long time.